Hi there, and welcome back to another one of my tutorial videos on how to use Pokemon Studio and PSDK. In the last few videos, we've basically gone over just creating your initial project, customizing and adding in new Pokemon, customizing old moves, and even adding in new moves a little bit, kind of going in depth on what each little part of the section for making a new move covers. And today we're going to be doing something very similar, but it's going to be going over items. So, like usual, make sure that you are updating your project and keeping it up to date. The latest version of PSDK is version 26.14, and as usual, when you've launched Pokemon Studio, it'll tell you in the bottom right with a little notification if there was an update or not with just Studio, and then if there was, just let it do its thing, close it, reopen it, and then you should be good to go. So, like I said, we are going to cover items today. We're going to go into our database and go into this little items section down here. Now, if you are just trying to modify existing items, it's actually really easy. Just like when you're searching for like a Pokemon or something, you can just click on this drop down menu up here and then type in the item that you want. It'll be whatever language that you had previously selected. So if you're French, then obviously you're going to be looking up item names in French. If you picked English as your project name, then you're going to be looking up names in English and etc. So it's very simple. Like if I was looking for a super potion, I would just type it up like that and easily found. Now you're going to notice that this says heal, and I think the previous one said ball. So as you can see, there are categories for every single item. So if we wanted to modify an item, we would click on up here and we would change the name. Now, I don't think this was in my last tutorial video, but there has been an update with Pokemon Studio, which now allows you to click on this button over here and you can change the different names. Now, if I had other languages like Spanish or French or Italian or German, there would be a little section here that would allow me to change the translations for those languages as well. So now everything is kind of, not everything, but that part is now built into Pokemon Studio, which is very, very nice. It's the same situation with the description. In case you're wondering, the description is shown when you're in your bag and you're hovering over this item. And then you can change your icon by just clicking on this and then going to your project, going into your graphics, going into your icons, and then picking something from here. It doesn't have to be numbered. This is actually an older system that PSDK used. Now, maybe it's easy for you to keep the ID in the picture name the same. That's what typically is done. But I personally find it a little bit easier to just name the graphic what it is. So for instance, I'll show you in a bit when we add a new item called the Dark Ball that you can totally have whatever for the name. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be in this graphics/icons folder. So, and then as you see again, here's the categories. Now going into each category, we do have a ball, an event item, a fleeing item, a generic item, heal, repel, stone, and TMs. Now, event items is actually going to be an item that's going to call a common event. I'll show you for an example what that would look like. A ball is obviously like a Pokeball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, etc. The fleeing ones is going to be like the Smoke Ball, I believe that's what it's called. So if we just looked up a Smoke Ball, you would see it says fleeing. So this means that whenever you have this item, it's probably just going to allow you to be able to flee no problem. Now going back into those categories, we have the generic item, which basically means it doesn't have an effect. It's just going to be based on the parameters and things that you've set in here. So like a generic item would probably be something like honey. It has no effect in battle, but it can still be held in things and could be flung, but it doesn't really have any effect. That's what a generic item is supposed to be. Now, maybe you're checking for these items in an event or something, and maybe they have uses in events, but in your actual database, they won't really do anything. That's going to be more so what you do in the back end of things. Continuing down, we have healing items, which is going to be your potions, even your paralyze heals and your burn heals probably are heal items as well. When you pick a category, it's going to unlock one of these sections down here in the database, which will allow you to modify those things as well, which we'll go into all of those in a moment. And then under heal, we have repel, which is obvious what that does. Super repels, yada yada. It's going to let you run away from Pokemon. And if we wanted to look at how that would look, whoops, wrong one. it would be in the exploration tab, and it would tell you how many steps the repel would last for. The common event ID is still blocked out, but that's because this isn't an event item. This is repel. So the exploration tab is shared between both repels and event items. Continuing down the list, we have stones, which is evolution stones. This is basically just flagging the item as an evolution item. So if you go into your Pokemon tab and you are looking at like an Eevee, and you look at its evolution methods here, you'll see that there's so many of them. You can pick the item here that evolves it, but you'll notice that since it evolves with a stone, it's going to be looking only for items that have that the evolution stone flag that we previously would have had to set. So if we go back over here and you look at the Thunderstone, you'll see it's marked as a stone, and that's how that tab will know which items to look at. And then finally, we have the techniques, which is basically just your TMs. So we're going to look at TM02 for an example. This one is going to be Dragon Claw, and it will give you, and it'll work, just like a TM would. So now, since I want to go into each and every one of these categories and really explore one of each of their little tabs or windows, I guess you could call it, we're going to start out with techniques, since that's where we're at right now. You can set, for all items here, you can set which bag it goes into. So even though it is marked as a technique item, you can still change where it goes. So you have the options between berries, key items, medicine, other items, Pokeballs, and TMs. These are the default bag items. You can't change these, unfortunately, but maybe down the line it'll be added, who knows. But for now, these are the only item sockets that you'll be able to assign in Pokemon Studio. And then you can change the price. This is going to be, if you're selling it inside of stores, you definitely are going to want to have a price set. And then the order. Now this is if you use the sort button, based on whatever number is here, it's going to change like a priority. Now this is all entirely up to you how you would do it. However, I think it might be in your best interest to just assign the TM number the same as the order set. So since this is TM2, I would personally set this as 2. That way when I get the other TMs and someone hits the sort button, it's going to go in the right order. Now maybe by PSDK by default, when you press sort, it will automatically check the names, and maybe you don't need to do that, but I haven't personally tested that, so I'm just saying, just to be extra safe, you could make sure by just assigning the same TM number as the order sort number, and you'll be fine. So and then here, this is the parameters that you can use the item in. So for instance, if you wanted to be able to use a TM in battle, which I'm very curious how that works because I haven't tried it, you would turn this flag on, which would then allow you to use the TM in battle. Pretty self-explanatory. Typically you only use this for your healing items and your balls and stuff. Who knows, maybe you can add a new feature where you can assign and change your moves mid-battle. That could be interesting. But by default, you're going to have only can be used on in maps. This is what you probably should use. Limited use is if you don't want unlimited TMs. This is entirely up to you. And then can be held. Typically TMs can't be held, I don't think. So by default, you should probably have this off. But again, entirely up to you on how you want your game to handle things. So now we're going to go into the more specific categories. So starting out, we have the technique category, which allows you to choose between an HM or a TM, and even it will pull from any list of the moves or any move from the list. You can type whatever you want. And then you'll assign a fling power. Now this isn't like you can't hold this normally, so by default the fling is going to be 0. But if you change your parameters to be held, you should probably change the fling to do some damage. I know we briefly went over this already, but we're going to go into it again. As you can see here, there is a price for the Super Repel. So if you buy this in a store, it's going to be worth $500. And as you see, it's going to go into your other items pocket. The parameters for an item like a Repel is typically can be used in a map, has limited use because you buy a certain amount of them and you use them, and then they can be held. That is just how it usually works. And even though it can be held, it doesn't have fling power by default. Maybe you want to change that, entirely up to you. And again, this is the one unique thing about these Repel items, is that you can change the number of steps that it takes until they will wear off. Pretty simple stuff. Now we're going to move on over into the event items, which I haven't really shown you much of. I think the best example of this would be looking at the journal, which allows you to use it in the map, can't be held, cannot be used in battle, and does not have limited uses because this is something that you're going to be using. It's probably going to be stored in your key items tab typically, and you'll be able to use it constantly because it's going to be something that's going to be calling one of your common events. And in this case, the common event it's calling is actually going to pull up a journal that's going to be your quest tracker. So it's going to have your main story quest, your side quests. If you use those, of course, you'll be able to find them there. Fishing rods also will use common events. So if you look at this, you'll see that this one's a 22, and if you use a super rod, I believe it actually uses 24. Yeah, so they do change based on which rod you're using. So if you ever wanted to modify these as well, you can look in your common events and check those IDs and see how they work. Going into the next tab, we're going to probably be looking into these growth and heal items. These are going to be under just the healing category. This would cover things like your carbos, your proteins, your medicines in general, anything that would heal status, anything that would heal HP, would revive someone. All of those things are going to be covered under here. So let's just pull up a super potion, for example, and you'll see here that you can modify the what type of healing item it is. You can do things like boost your stats, which is going to cover the battle section, the HP points, which is just going to be doing your regular healing. You can do HP and status, which is going to heal, like this is like a full restore. You can do it by HP rate. So I'm going to actually open all of these just so we can get a better look at them. So if we look at the boost ones, you're going to see you'll be able to change how much you lose happiness. This is typically done for things like herbs. Pokemon don't like them because they're bitter, I think, or that's like the reasoning or something behind them. They'll usually give you some type of boost, like a stat boost or something, at the cost of happiness. And you can choose what stat you want to modify. Now, it looks like you can only do one stat. You can't do things like attack and special attack. You're going to have to make a more custom item for that. And then you can change any of these stats, and then you can change the number that you want it to change by. If you want it to go down, you can't. Unfortunately, there's no negative value. So this is only going to make it go up. This is like your X attacks, your X defends, all of those items. I don't know what they're called nowadays. I think their names got changed. I could be wrong, but this is how you would do those items. This means it's only going to happen during the battle. Going back into the categories, we're going to have the HP, which was the first thing that we were covering, which is just going to show how much HP it's going to heal, and then you can again apply an HP or a happiness penalty. The HP and the status is going to give you an HP healing, which status you would like to remove, and again another happiness penalty. You can do a HP rate, so if you wanted to do something like healing 25%, 50%, 75%, or even 64%, you know, you could do whatever you want. And then you can do the penalty again, and then you have the HP rates and the statuses that it's going to heal. This is just another mix of one of these. Moving on, we can have a healing item that does nothing and only lowers your happiness. I don't know why, but you could do it. You could do things that will heal PP, so it's like your ethers, your max ethers. This one will do all of your moves. This one will do one specific move. And you can choose obviously how much, and again with the happiness. And then you can do the PP increasing moves, which is obviously like your PP ups. And you can choose between doing plus 20% PP, or you can do maxing out your PP. Typically you can only use these 5 times, I believe. So it still makes sense to do it by 20. So yeah, you have the two options between doing 20% or maxing out the amount of PP that a move can even get. You have your progression that's going to change your EVs. It's going to unlock this new growth category over here. Now this is like your proteins, your carboses, and all of the other medicines that will increase a stat. You can choose which stat you would like to increase, and you can choose the amount that you would like it to increase. It's going to go based off of a solid value. And then you can do level increase, which this is basically the same thing as the EV increase, but it's just defaulting to the level increase, because if you noticed over here, we can set it over here to progression of EVs, but you can change it over to level increase, and it's just going to fix it over here in the healing category as well. So if you do change it, don't worry, it's not going to break anything. You can change the values like I said previously, and as always you can change the happiness penalty. Now for the last category we're going to cover, it's going to be the status healing items. These are your burn heals, freeze heals, paralyze heals, etc. Very self-explanatory, and you can also set it to choose heal all things. So we are going to check on that revive. So it does look like it does an HP rate and status. So you do have to do that. If you are trying to make like a revive-like item, make sure that you're doing HP rate and status, and not just status, as if you just do status, you would still be at 0 HP. Now I did say I was going to cover making your own item. Now obviously I've already broken down every single category that I can, so I'm not going to do that again when it comes to making a new item, but I am going to show you that window in that process of making a specific item. My item of choice is going to be the dark ball. Now I am going to do it by naming it the dark ball. So now that we've named it the dark ball, let's give it a description. We're just giving it a very simple description. I'm not going to be going over making a very custom ball that you can't do in Pokemon Studio, because like I've said previously in other videos, I want to go over all of those things, but I'm gonna do them after I cover all the basics. So if you want to choose your icon, make sure you click on this and make sure you are in your project's graphics icons folder. It keeps defaulting to my usual project, which I assume is just because it's what I usually use. I don't really know, but I keep switching it over. Just make sure that you're always in your project's graphics / icons folder, or else you're gonna have issues. Now, like I said before, you can pick any of these if you wanted, or if you're using a custom graphic, you can use whatever name you want, and I'm just gonna use the dark ball because that's easier for me. Now, I would not suggest modifying the identifier, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Just leave this as the default. If it works, don't mess with it, you know? And then of course, the category. When you're making your item, make sure that you're picking the category. It doesn't matter too much because you can change this later, but we're gonna set it as a ball, just so everything is right off the bat. You cannot change the identifier later, just so we're clear. This needs to stay what it is, and if you ever do change the name of the item, it's okay, because this isn't what's gonna be displayed. The dark ball identifier is actually gonna be here no matter what, and if I was to paste what I just copied, you'll see that it looks like this. But if I did change the name from dark ball to super dark ball or something, and I copy the identifier, you're gonna notice that that doesn't change. It's still just dark ball. So your identifier is not gonna change later, but it's okay because no one's gonna see it. It's all back end, and it's just gonna be for you. I know it's not ideal. If you do change your name, you're probably gonna want the identifier to change, but I'm not gonna tell you how to do all that because you can really ruin some other stuff. So we're not gonna cover that. Something I forgot to mention with the ball, so it's okay because we're covering it now, is that like usual, you pick where you want it to go and you can set a price. Now I'm gonna make this $1,000. It's a very pricey Pokeball. And then we're gonna set the parameters that it can be used in battle, and it does have limited uses. It could also be held, because why not? It's gonna have a default fling value of 30, and then over here is the catch rate. Now if you want it to be as awesome as a Master Ball, it's 255. If you want it to be as bad as a Pokeball, it's 1. Okay? Pretty simple. I would look at all of the other balls if you want to do a similar catch rate to something else. And if you're very curious about things like dusk balls and dusk balls and how those work, we will cover those in the future. But those effects are actually handled outside of Studio, so just keep that in mind. Now here's something that you're going to notice. It's going to ask you what color and the sprite sheet. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know what this does. I wouldn't really modify this just because I don't know what it does. And then this right here, this is gonna pick a very specific graphic from your project. So if you go into your project and we go into our graphics folder and we go in the ball folder, and you're gonna see that the sprite sheet it's pulling from is ball 1. We're gonna open ball 1 just so you can see what it looks like. So ball 1, the first frame is this top one, second frame, third frame, fourth frame, fifth frame, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, etc. Right? So this is going to be the animation when you throw the ball. Okay? This is, I believe, both, or this is only when you're catching a Pokemon. I don't believe this is shown when you're throwing out your Pokemon. And secondly, if you want to customize these, you're going to have a hard time. But you can make your own. as long as you understand that you can make your own sheet, I think that's very important. And it works just like anything else. You just need to have the width and the height of each frame to be the same, and you're just working your way down. So however many frames you have, that's how tall it needs to be. So multiply the width by the frames, and that's how tall you need to make your graphic. You can change this. So now, since my dark ball is probably the closest thing I'm gonna get, it's probably like a heavy ball. Even though the heavy ball doesn't really look like how I, wait, that's an ultra ball. Which one is the heavy ball? Initially, I wanted to do the dusk ball because I feel like this one has the most similar like effect to what I would assume a dark ball would have, but the color is just too different, so I don't think it would really look as believable. And personally, I think it's kind of hard to remake the effect. So we're just gonna do ball 22. It's probably the closer one that we have. So we're just gonna change this sprite sheet to ball 22. And just like that, it's now gonna play that animation. It's gonna have this catch rate, and I just made my own ball. It's actually very simple. And I hope that this video did help you. I know I've said previously that I plan on making more of these. I've been seeing the requests and I've been seeing you guys asking for them, trust me. And I promise I will make them when I can. I wanna make them more often, but I just haven't been able to, unfortunately. More of these to come for sure, and hopefully we're out of the beginner stuff soon. We only have a few more tabs to cover, and then we're going to be going into the more in-depth things like the ball effects, custom move effects, and maybe even going over those abilities finally, because these are definitely going to be the last thing we cover, as you literally can't do anything with them in studio. So keep all of that in mind. Hopefully this helped you. And again, if you do have any other questions, you can always ask in the comments, but I would fully recommend joining the Pokemon Workshop Discord. You're going to get the best and the most help over there. So fully recommend it. It's in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.